We are back on the Rational Boomer podcast. Hopefully, your day is going well. It is Friday. Yesterday, we had Old Soul on the show helping me out while I'm down in Georgia. We have another helper, as it were, on this show. It is Eric from Iowa. And Eric, thanks for joining us. And we should let people know there may be another co-host in there from time to time. Your dog, she
Yes,
is a boy or girl?
girl,
What's her name?
Cecilia.
Cecilia. Good dog name.
Yep, and
But she'll
almost
crop
on
up ever
cue.
so. And he was going to put her in a cage. I said, "Fuck that. Let the dog be on the show. I don't care. I
Oh,
love
thanks.
dogs." And she
Yeah.
obviously has some affection toward you. And so that's cool.
Oh, she loves everybody.
Yeah. Um, one of the, you talked about coming on this show, and I said, yeah, that's a great idea. And one of the things that are first and foremost that we need to talk about was yesterday there was a school shooting in your home state of Iowa. I've been bouncing around doing a bunch of stuff. I only know a little bit about it. Maybe you can bring us up to date about what happened and where it happened.
I don't know all the details. I know it happened in a small town called Perry, Iowa. It's a town of about 8,000 people. Perry is odd for the state of Iowa in that it's about one-third Hispanic.
Really?
Yes, which is it's against the norm for most towns in Iowa. Um, it is there's a big meat packing plant there, which is a draw because they're jobs.
Right.
So, but it's about one-third Hispanic from what I know. Small town, and the high school and middle school are connected, and apparently, this 17-year-old went into the high school or the middle school. I'm not sure which part of the building. And I know there were 6 people shot, 1 confirmed dead, which was the middle schooler, 6th grade, I believe,
Right.
and then 5 injured, including the principal. He used a pump action shotgun and a handgun. Did not use an AR or any sort of assault rifle.
Right.
And he was found dead apparently by self-inflicted gunshot wound. And I guess during a sweep of the school, they found a very rudimentary explosive of some kind. That's all I know. I didn't see anything specific about saying if it was a pipe bomb or what kind of a bomb or what it really was, but an explosive of some kind as well.
Was there any talk of what precipitated this? I mean, the kid was 17 years old. He walks into a high school. He starts shooting with a shotgun. He kills a 6th grader, injures 5 other people. Is there any sense as to why this happened or what his interest in doing this was?
Not that I have heard. I only got to see a little bit of it here and there. I know there was some misinformation going out. I was hearing bits and pieces while I was at work today. And one of the pieces that came out that I had heard was that the principal who had been shot he was the fatality. And then I found out later through news source that though that wasn't the case, it was a student that had died. But he was shot. He might be in critical condition. I'm not sure. But no real nothing I've seen about why. Apparently he was live streaming it on Instagram,
Wow.
and including to the point when he took his own life, is what I was told.
Wow. And uh, is it safe to say this kid went to that school?
I believe so.
Okay. So he had some kind of issue with somebody at school. I can't imagine it was a fucking 6th grader when you're 17, but maybe the principal, maybe the administration and the 6th grader and whoever else was just nothing more than collateral damage.
Could have
Uh,
been wrong place, wrong time. I don't know. I know it all happened like 7:40, 7:45 in the morning. So it was well before school had started. So there weren't as many students in the building as there could have been, which did prevent it from being as devastating as it potentially was.
right, right. What are the gun laws in Iowa? I'm guessing they're not too stringent.
No, they're not. All you have to do is be able to pass a simple background check.
Well, that's something. I
So
mean,
as long as you're not a felon, basically you can get a gun.
okay. So I'm assuming this 17-year-old probably got the gun from his parents or something like that.
I haven't heard in the articles I've read and the things I've seen the news reports and stuff have not said where he got the gun, but I would venture to guess that yes, he got it from his parents.
You know, a 17-year-old kid may have a shotgun for hunting purposes, but a 17-year-old kid doesn't walk into some place and buy a handgun. I'm presuming
You
that's
wouldn't think.
unusual.
It's I believe so, yeah.
Okay.
Like I still think you have to be 18 in Iowa to purchase
Any gun.
um any gun, I believe.
That makes sense. That makes sense. Well, what do you think the response? We've got a lot of MAGA or Republican people in Iowa, and they have a strong opinion of the Second Amendment. What's the overall feeling of most of the people in Iowa when something like this happens? I mean, it's something that always happens in some other state to other people, but now it's in your back door or your backyard. How do you think people are responding to that?
Uh I've heard it from the few people I've talked to, I've heard mixed reactions. One of my coworkers who is mostly a Trumplefuck, but when he heard the shooter had been killed, he basically said what I would have expected is good. Um, Deserved it, even though it was self-inflicted. A few other people, I've heard some comments though about the gun laws that they need to do something, do more, but all you're probably going to get is thoughts and prayers out of our politicians.
Yeah, no doubt, no doubt. And this is an interesting lead up because in the not too distant future, less than 2 weeks, you're going to have the Iowa caucus. We talked about that before, and this is a big deal for the Republicans. It's no deal for the Democrats. But we've got Ron DeSantis and Nikki Haley fighting like heck, thinking they might win the Iowa caucus. But it doesn't seem like they're even fucking close to Donald Trump. How does Donald Trump not win the Iowa caucus?
I The Iowa caucus has always been it's a dice shoot, it's a craps game. Um, it also, as I talked about on one of the last podcasts, it doesn't really mean much in the way of who gets the nomination. So if Donald Trump does win Iowa, I actually feel better about his chances of not getting the nomination.
Yeah,
Um, but how does he not win? I don't know. There's a good chance, depending. This actually might be, the response to this might be the way Iowa goes, in a way. If Donald Trump comes out and starts either doesn't acknowledge it or they don't like his response to it, there's a chance that this could affect the Iowa caucus. Same with any of the other politicians. Um, and you mentioned Ron DeSantis in the last several weeks. I don't know how they got my number because I'm registered independent, but I have gotten multiple text messages that have ended up being identified as spam, inviting me to varying events up to within an hour's drive of my house for Ron DeSantis.
wow. Well, he's
Meet and greets
desperate.
for Ron DeSantis, meet and greets for Casey DeSantis, um, and town hall meetings, etc. I have never went to any of them, but
I'm thinking a lot of people haven't gone to them. I think they're having trouble pulling a crowd. That's why they're begging anybody to come.
yeah, I think so.
So is it in Iowa right now, leading up? We're less than 2 weeks away from the Iowa caucus. Is there a lot of excitement about this? Is there a lot of pride in the Iowa caucus? Is people jacked up
There,
about this?
not with the people I've talked to, but knowing from past years, yes, there's a lot of pride with the Iowa caucus. Um, and we enjoy our first in the nation status, um, in part because it brings some importance to Iowa. Because after this, you're not even up to the nomination point, you're not going to see a candidate in Iowa, nor more than likely. Maybe a few stops here and there, but they're going to be campaigning in the other states that still have primaries to go. And then you're not going to see a whole lot of stops in Iowa after the party conventions
No. I mean, don't
because
don't
Iowa's
don't
only got 5 electoral votes. We're not a big swing state, and even if we were a swing state, it's only 5 votes. You know, they're going to campaign in places like Pennsylvania where there's, I think, what is it, 20 or something like that.
Don't Iowans or Iowegians, whatever is the proper way to address Iowans, is don't they realize that these guys are all in love with Iowa up to the caucus, and then after the caucus they say fuck yourself because you're not that important to me now.
A little bit, but you also hear um the old school and the older crowd talk about it, that's why we have to keep the electoral college, because if it wasn't for the electoral college, you'll still get a few campaign stops even after the party nomination, but it's only going to be a couple. But a lot of the people that are in support of the Iowa or of the electoral college, um, they do firmly believe that if you went to straight popular vote, you would never see a candidate in Iowa again after the caucuses.
Right, right. Now, do you think that I I don't even know how they went in 2022 or 2020? Is it a foregone conclusion that Iowa's going to go Republican, whoever the nominee is for the Republican Party for president?
As far as the election,
Yeah. I mean, do they always go red no matter what? Even though I know there's a
no,
lot of people that are
we
blue in
went
the
because
state.
we went blue twice for Barack Obama.
Wow.
Yeah, we were up until Barack Obama. We were solidly purple. We had a Democratic governor. We Democrats were in control of the legislature. Um, we were getting shit done, but uh, uh, what's his first name? Tom Vilsack was our governor, and then he got term limited, and I think no, he was running again. He was running again, or was going to run or something, and I think Obama tapped him for his cabinet, and like the next guy up, the Republicans were so scared that he'd get in and keep going. They brought Terry Branstad back, that dinosaur out of retirement, and who won on name recognition alone. There were a lot of people my age that thought back to how things were in the 80s, early 90s. Well, oh, things seemed to be okay in the state when we were here, because you look around, you didn't see any problems. And I recognize that name. He was governor forever. We'll give him another term. And
Right.
that's what we did. He got elected, then got reelected, and then Donald Trump made him ambassador to China, and that's how he got Kim Reynolds.
And she's a doozy, isn't she?
Oh, she's great.
Well, the thing about it is something you said earlier when we talked about this is Donald Trump is constantly arguing with Kim Reynolds. And Kim Reynolds is very popular in Iowa. So theoretically, you would suggest that maybe Donald Trump wouldn't have a chance there. But according to polling, which I don't trust, but Donald Trump is so far ahead, Nikki Haley and Ron DeSantis can't do shit, in spite of the argument between Donald Trump and Kim Reynolds.
Yeah, but the polling has been wrong going into the Iowa caucuses more times, I believe, than it's been right.
Really?
You never know which way it's going to break. Um, and who knows? It's going to be interesting to see how it does come across that night. But I I don't even know if I was going to break for Donald Trump. They could surprise us.
But the thing about it is you have to wonder, a lot of things are going south for Donald Trump. And I think 2024 is going to be a big losing year for Donald Trump. Not that every year isn't a losing year for Donald Trump, but this is going to be especially bad. Do you think if Donald Trump doesn't get the vote in Iowa, that that's devastating to him? Does it change anything going on into the future?
Personally, I wouldn't say it's devastating. However, I like politically, I wouldn't call it devastating, except for the fact that the media is going to be spinning that against him.
Yeah.
It is going to be driving his ego nuts. He can't take the ego. Um, his ego can't handle, oh, you lost again. You lost in Iowa. Um, and they're going to be talking about it. Oh, does he have any momentum going into, I think it's New Hampshire next.
Right.
after Iowa.
And Nikki
You know,
Haley's a lot closer there than she is in
right.
Iowa.
And they're going to be talking, well, you lost Iowa. Are you going to even have a chance in New Hampshire? Is Nikki Haley going to catch you or whatever the case might be? Um, thank you. And they're going to, they're going to be talking about it. It's going to be driving his ego nuts that they talk about him losing the Iowa caucus and acting like the rest of them aren't a foregone conclusion. So it could be devastating to him, maybe not politically, but emotionally, mentally, to lose Iowa.
And I think people don't realize how big a deal that is with a guy with the personality that Donald Trump has. You can get indictments and you can do all kinds of things. But the thing that upsets a narcissist most is getting embarrassed. And when they get embarrassed, they react irrationally. They burn bridges, they scorch earths. And I can tell you what Donald Trump's going to say if he loses the Iowa caucus: voter fraud. Oh, we got to have an investigation. It's going to be all that shit over again because he doesn't have a sense of when he's losing. Even though he's gotten nowhere with the federal election, he's just going to do the same shit over and over again, and it's going to get tiring. Eventually, Republicans will say, "Now, come on, fuck."
You would think, but if they were going to do that, I think they would have called it already. Um, I think there's a better chance of him getting pulled off the ballot than the Republicans. There's going to be 30% of them that's going to side with him no matter what.
Right.
And I don't know. I heard there was another state, Illinois, today. I think there's now a lawsuit.
I heard Illinois and
Right.
Massachusetts.
Yeah.
They're both
Uh,
looking to take him off the ballot.
right. And it could all be rendered moot depending on how the Supreme Court rules with the Colorado case. But I don't know. I think there's no way they let him off the hook. I think they
No.
declare him ineligible off the ballot.
Yeah, I mean, if the Supreme Court does what they have done in the past and what is in accordance with law, they will side with the Colorado Supreme Court, which will affect every other state in the country.
I don't remember who I was listening to. I was listening to somebody who said it might have been Glenn Kirshner, but I could be wrong. They were saying they expect that John Roberts is going to try to get the Supreme Court to vote 9-0
Yeah,
in favor of keeping Donald Trump off the ballot. Whether that's simply upholding the Colorado decision or them not deciding it or whatever the case might be. Oh, hi. Yes, thank you. But I think that's what they're going to do is they're going to vote. He's going to try to get them to vote 9-0, or if they don't vote 9-0, to not write a dissenting opinion
right.
and just whatever the court says, even if they don't agree with it, because those dissents, the way I understand it, is when they go back to look at other cases, they can use anything written in a dissent as proof and as standing to change a case,
Right.
down the road.
One of the things I've talked about, and I'm curious as to what you think. I think, in just general terms, if the Republicans had their choice, the relatively normal Republicans, they would love to see him taken off the ballot because he's done nothing but drag down the Republican Party. He's most certainly going to lose to Joe Biden. I don't think there's any question about it. But I think the reason the Republicans are holding on so tightly to Donald Trump is they're afraid that Trump-a-fucks just won't vote at all if Donald Trump isn't on the ballot. And if they don't vote at all, that affects all the down ballot shit. They're going to lose votes in the Senate, in the House, in legislatures, state legislatures, and governorships. They're more worried about the down ballot than whether Donald Trump will win or not, because I think they know he can't win.
I think they're worried about that. Because I think you're right. You take 30% of the Republican Party, which I don't know if that's 15, 20 million votes
Right.
nationwide.
That's significant.
It's significant. And in some states, Colorado only has what, like 80,000 people in the entire state. And, they're significantly blue, but some of those rural districts, if they stay home, there's a chance you could flip a Republican stronghold, even
Right.
if it's only for one term. And I don't know the math. I saw a statistic at one point, but uh, there is such a greater chance once you have the seat of keeping the seat.
Yeah, incumbent
I don't
always
remember,
has the advantage. Yeah.
yeah, but I don't remember what that percentage is. But we flip some of these seats and stuff starts getting done. It's going to be hard for them to take those seats back.
Well, it's going to be because they're not known for doing anything. They're obstructionist. They don't accomplish anything. And like you say, once they lose seats, it's going to be impossible for them to get them back, especially if the Democrats are actually doing things that people appreciate and like. And I think that's where we're headed in 2024. Democrats are going to get some power. They're going to do a good job. And the Republicans are going, I'm feeling pretty good now. Why would I vote for some dumb fuck that's not going to do anything for me?
I think so, and I think once Donald Trump is out of the picture, you're going to have a big chunk of right wing commentators. I don't want to say media because you're going to have places like Fox News always doing what they do,
Right.
but the Trump fucks on like just the comment sections and on TikTok and on YouTube and wherever. I think they're going to be more quiet once they're not backed up by who they see as a very powerful person. Um, because they're going to be embarrassed. They're going to be uh, shocked that they didn't get their way. I mean, I could be wrong. Maybe they come back twice as loud, but I don't think so. I don't think you're going to have as much of the misinformation, as much of the projection once Donald Trump's out of the picture.
No, I agree. Once he's out of the equation, out of the narrative, it will get much quieter. I think we talked about this before we came on. I hope we didn't talk about this while we were on. But we're seeing some signs uh, that Republicans, Trump-a-fucks, MAGA, whatever you want to call them, are absolutely fucking terrified right now. And I did a TikTok about this. They're terrified. And the perfect um, explanation or example of that is that over the last few days, there's been like 23 bomb threats at various state capitals around the country. Now, you know that's not coming from Democrats, but they're fucking terrified that their boy's going to lose. And even more importantly, they're terrified that their boy's going to jail with some of his buddies as well. So they're trying to pull the bully strategy and scare people into saying, oh, we better vote for Trump because they're coming after us. Interesting thing is, in all of those threats, there was not one attack. This is who they are. They're loudmouth, pussy ass bitches that makes claims but don't back anything up. Do you think this is causing people to be more concerned about about violence or civil war in the future? I think what they're doing now tells me that it's not going to happen. Otherwise, we'd see the violence.
Well, there's the few that are calling for the violence,
Yeah,
and what they're doing is they think it's going to be them versus people like you and me, the ones that are calling for violence. They think it's going to be them versus anybody they deem liberal, and it's going to be a free for all, and it's going to be, if these guys even try to organize into some sort of a civil war, they're going up against the United States military.
right. Or at
They're
least
not.
the
They're
National
not.
Guard.
Well, National Guard, the military, the Army, the Marines. Who knows what Joe Biden would call in? But either way, they're going up against fully trained military personnel, and the military isn't going to side with these fucks.
Yeah.
They're
They,
they're going to uphold the oath that they took and side with the people and freedom, and it's going to be a bloodbath.
yeah. And
And I
that's
think if they do have anything, it's going to be just a couple of very small skirmishes, a few hundred of the dumb fucks maybe trying something. They're going to get a good chunk of them will get wiped out a couple of times, and that'll be the end of hearing anything about it.
yeah, I think so. But you know what? There's been a plenty of opportunity for them to get together and show their anger when Donald Trump was indicted in New York, when he was indicted in Florida in his home state, when he was indicted in Georgia. Everybody was outraged and making claims and making threats. Nothing ever happened. Now there are threats being made against, Letitia James and Judge Chutkin, but every once in a while you'll see one crazy fuck come out and do something ridiculous, but that gets shut down pretty quickly. Uh, the Trump fucks, the MAGA folks, they're some weak ass bitches. Half of the really violent people are in fucking jail from January 6th. And they've seen that, so there's a little bit of paranoia with them, thinking, oh, this is just a trap. No, bitch, you come and commit a crime, you're going to fucking jail. It's simple as that.
Yeah, they're seeing the back end to fuck around and find out.
Absolutely.
But I think a chunk of them are scared, but also there's not the leadership. We've taken out the Proud Boys, we've taken out the Oath Keepers. There was another group, I can't think now which one, but I want to say there was another one that might have been sentenced or is at least awaiting trial, where their leadership is in custody without bond. And Donald Trump isn't in the White House. He doesn't have the DOJ. They don't have a command structure above them, and these guys just go wherever they're told.
Right.
The people on the ground that are the ones calling for like a civil war or violence or whatever, they don't have enough brain cells to actually piece together what to do, where to do it,
No.
or anything like that. But they would go where told. What somebody else said, well, show up here and then we'll see what happens. They'd be there.
Well, the other thing to consider too is during the January 6th, it wasn't up to just the devices of Oath Keepers and Proud Boys. They had the help, which we'll be hearing about soon enough, help of people in DC and the administration, the people that are friends of the administration, people in Congress. Those are the ones that help facilitate that, help to organize that, help to fund that. Now they're not going to get this time around. These people know they're already going to be in trouble. They ain't going to step in it again and try to create something like that. So the Trump fucks, the MAGA fucks, whoever they are, they're much weaker than they were during January 6th. The Republicans were pulling out the stops, and now they're not helping those fucks anymore. That would be crazy if they did.
Oh, by far. And the other thing that is happening is I think there's been such a big push with the younger crowd that they're pushing back on social media. They're coming hard on them, on TikTok and places. They're not getting that message out, and the ones that are getting, they're getting trolled just as bad.
Oh
and
yeah.
called out for it by people on the left, and they don't know how to react. But the simple fact is, anybody that might be swayed on the other side, they're looking at a numbers game. They're going, I don't know, there's too many numbers. They also saw everybody who got ID'd and called out when they released some of the January 6th footage. And suddenly everybody became an amateur detective and was starting to call in tips. Hey, that looks like my neighbor Jim. That looks like Joe down the street. Pretty soon, Jim and Joe are arrested and charged with being there. And now they're doing a year of time in a federal prison.
That's the
These
interesting thing.
back. Go ahead.
Well, Kevin McCarthy got all the security footage from the Capitol on January 6th. They thought something was going to happen. Nothing happened. Uh, Mike Johnson got the footage. I'm going to put it out. And of course, more Trump fucks get arrested. Everything they've tried with regards to that to try to discredit the whole insurrection idea has failed miserably. But somehow they still keep trying to do it. They still keep talking the same talk. And I don't understand it because they know they look foolish. And I have to believe it's just to appease Donald Trump. And when does that day come when they're tired of Donald Trump? They're tired of losing and they step away from Donald Trump. They're waiting. I think they're all waiting for him to be taken out of the equation, either convicted and put in jail, or to drop out, or to get sick, or to fucking keel over. I think they're all waiting for that.
Maybe I think there's another option. When the Supreme Court weighs in and says, "Hey, Donnie, your diapered ass can't be on the ballot because you're an insurrectionist and a traitor. Await your day in court." Um, I think you see some of them turning. They may kind of support him, but at the same point, I could see them starting to shift away from it too, afraid that they could get ruled up in a similar manner
Right.
and kicked out of their own races.
Right. Right. Exactly. Exactly. Now, if you watch TikTok, I know you do, I do too. There's a lot of people that come out on TikTok and give breaking news that frankly isn't breaking news. We had people telling us who's on the list before the list came out. The list comes out, we realize it's not a fucking list after all. It's documents, and not the whole pile of documents has been released. Uh, People are constantly saying shit in the media and TikTok about things that they claim are true and not true. I've heard some people talk about the ultimate indictments of sitting members of Congress. I've even seen somebody say, well, this name and this name and this name, and they're all reasonable names to get indicted, and I think they may get indicted. But I haven't heard anything as far as superseding indictments from Jack Smith at all. Am I missing something here? Or is people just pulling this shit out of their ass?
I think some of them are pulling shit out of their ass. Um, some of it is wishful thinking,
Yeah.
and I think some of it is we have a problem on the left, just like they do on the right. And I hate to make this comparison, but you get listening to the same voices all the time, and pretty soon you start mixing opinion with fact.
Yeah.
And then somebody gets on, well, I'm going to start making my videos or whatever. Well, this person I listened to said this, and they've now convinced themselves that their opinion of who could be convicted or charged or whatever is now a fact because they're right on other news and they're not drawing that line. And some of it could just be they know if they come out and say, "Hey, Marjorie Taylor Greene's got superseding indictments, Lauren Boebert's going to be charged with treason," that it's going to go viral.
Yeah.
People on the left are going to share it. They're going to love it. They're going to be at a 10 million views or whatever in 3 hours, and it's going to be their best video ever.
Right.
And I think some of that is it's like you were saying about not trying to just go for the views and the follows. And people know that if they do something that crazy, they're gonna get that, and not everybody's gonna fact check them.
Well, I think if you're on TikTok or YouTube or Instagram and you have a large following, you have a responsibility to do everything you can to be accurate and truthful. But like you say, when people get a little jacked up and get caught up in themselves, now they're just looking for viral videos. They don't care about, I mean, doing TikToks, I know how I do a TikTok. I mean, how I do it if I'm really kind of fired up about it, or if I'm talking about some current news, I know that shit's going to take off. But you got to be careful. You can't be greedy when you say, okay, well, it's been a little slow lately, so I'm going to say Marjorie Taylor Greene's getting an indictment tomorrow. I get tired of people making these predictions that something's going to happen imminently, and I know it's not true because I can go back and look at every news source and there's nothing of it. They just say this shit in hopes people will go running with it. And a lot of people will. But if you're somebody who's talking to a lot of people on a regular basis, you have a responsibility to be accurate and to be as truthful as you can. That doesn't mean you can't be wrong now and again, but if you are, own up to it and say, I was fucking wrong. This isn't true. But some people will tell you shit, and then I will get them coming to me, Mike, I heard this. How come you're not reporting it? And then I have to tell them because it's bullshit. It's not true. Even though it's the news they want to hear, I got to tell them it's not fucking true.
Yeah, we have to be just as vigilant on the left as the right to um, be aware of that, because there are people that do spread that because they know it'll spread like wildfire. And not that I want to give them that much credit, but it wouldn't surprise me if some people on the right aren't putting some of that stuff out there only to make us look just as foolish, because they think it'll make us look stupid,
Right.
which it does, if we run with it. And, um, and I'm not saying many people on the right are that smart, but I know some of them are. And then you also have to be wary of anybody that is a a plant or whatever you want to call it, working for a foreign government trying to influence our election. They could just as easily be spreading false information, trying to get our hopes up. Because if we go into it thinking that there's any day now Marjorie Taylor Greene's going to get arrested and Lauren Boebert's going to get arrested or whoever, and we drop our guard, do we push as hard to make sure that they get campaigned out?
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I think the Republicans, we know for a fact that the Republicans' only strategy in politics is try to spew lies and carry it in the narrative. Not only positive things to make Democrats look stupid, but negative things for the Republicans to throw it out there and keep throwing it out there so people ultimately believe it's real. That's kind of what I think about this polling stuff and Joe Biden getting indicted and all this fishy stuff going on. There's nothing to it, but they keep saying it. And there are Republicans that, of course, will believe it. But unfortunately, there are some Democrats that buy into it too, just because they heard it said loud and continually. That's enough for them to feel like it's the truth. And that's where we all have to be careful.
Yeah, and that's been a problem for decades in the
Yeah.
Republican Party. Um, you know, well, but when we have to worry about it on the left too, that things being said loud and proud, people assume that it's correct, and that's not always the case. I mean, and then you also have the other one, like Fox News, that likes to omit things.
Right. Right.
They only give you part of the story. I saw a clip from Fox News where they were talking about the documents related to Epstein. Now, we know it's not a complete list. It doesn't say this person did this person did this, none of that. But conveniently, whose name did they not show up on their broadcast when they were talking about it? They included Al Gore.
Yeah.
Al Gore hasn't been relevant since he lost in 2000, but they had to include Al Gore up there that his name was listed in these documents somewhere,
Bill
which
Clinton.
Bill Clinton, but I think Al Gore's name was only listed as like, as a passing mention that, you know, maybe not even as a witness to events, but he was in like a conversation with Epstein or something. I'm not
Right.
sure. But there was nothing incriminating about Al Gore's name, but they mentioned it. But whose name did they conveniently not mention? Donald
Right.
Trump.
And he was definitely there. And there's going to be other Republicans there. And for me, it really doesn't matter. I think the important thing to remember, I was talking to this about Old Soul. And again, I don't want to piss on anybody's parade, but these documents, unless they say that they were doing something illicit, and there may be some of that. I mean, we've only seen 40 pages of some 200 pages that are yet to come. Um, as a rule of law, there is nothing that I know of yet that's been damning saying this guy did this to this person. There's no evidence in that regard. Now, there may be some coming, I don't know, but people are getting freaked out just because their name shows up on these things. I saw a story, I saw her talking about it. Katie Couric was on some show. They were talking about Jeffrey Epstein, and she said she had dinner at Jeffrey Epstein's house in New York because a friend of hers was going and she'd heard that Prince Andrew was going to be there. And because she's a news person, she thought, well, maybe it's a good idea and knew nothing about Jeffrey Epstein. It wasn't exposed at that point. The point is whoever's name on that list is doesn't immediately implicate them in a crime because of those names on that document, at least four of them are victims. So they certainly aren't guilty. We gotta, if we're gonna do this, let's do it right. If there are people that are guilty on this list, and there no doubt is some, let's fucking do it right instead of blowing it all up and then making it totally discredited because everybody made too much of it.
Exactly. I mean, if it does come out that Bill Clinton or Al Gore was involved in anything, criminal, charge them,
Yeah.
try them. If they're convicted, sentence them and move on.
Right.
If it comes out that, like you said, Katie Couric had a dinner at Epstein's house. Oh, wow, what a scandal. You know, she didn't know the depth of what was going on at that point, and it probably never came up in that meal, in that dinner.
No.
So you can't hold her accountable for anything. We have to approach it right. Let's let it. It's got to take its course, and we can't try this whole thing in the court of public opinion just because they're connected to the guy.
The interesting thing is, one of the other people that I've heard people talk about was on the island. I don't know if this is true. This is coming from any source, but I've heard this before. Some people think Stephen Hawking was on the island. Now, is Stephen Hawking guilty? What the fuck can he do? He's in a wheelchair. He can't move his hands other than witness some egregious acts. I don't know. Um, I have to believe because of who Jeffrey Epstein was and because he had so much money, there is a faction of people that were involved in the sex trafficking and the abuse of underage women. But I have to believe just to create, the image, there were people on the outside that said, oh, here's a rich guy. I'll have dinner with him. I have a feeling that is the case. So my point is let's get the people that are criminals, but let's not make everybody a criminal that knew Jeffrey Epstein, especially before any of this was exposed. Now, once he was exposed in the early 2000s, that's a different deal. If I know a guy's a pedophile, I'm not going over for dinner, whether he's doing something or not. If they knew about it, then the question is, why are you associating with this fucking criminal? And that isn't enough to put somebody in jail over, but it's a question that needs to be asked.
Oh, exactly. I know what you mean. On a smaller scale, there was a guy. There was my former best friend from high school, um, and the guy was a fuck up, and I haven't talked to him in years. But he graduated with us, failed out of the Navy because he couldn't pass a drug test. Um, Comes back, goes back into the same life he had right in high school, just bouncing around, never really having a major job. The only thing he was doing was delivering pizzas, which, you know, no disrespect to anybody who does that for a living, but this guy thought he was big shit,
Yeah.
and he was depressed that he was still delivering pizzas just like he did in high school. Um, and pretty soon he's starting to pal around with the senior class, and every year his new circle of friends is the senior class. Next thing you know, he's 23 dating a 15-year-old,
Yeah.
goes to jail for sleeping with her best friend, and some girl under 13.
Wow.
Since he got out of prison, I've had one conversation with him. He gave me some bullshit excuse as to why he thought it was, or what, not even excusing what he did, but a justification, I guess, in his mind of how he got to that point in his life. And I ignored it and basically said, dude, you got this on your record. I can't be guilty by association.
Right.
And I haven't talked to him since,
I,
other than a couple times out in, like, I see him at a gas station and I catch him in passing, and it's 3 words.
yeah.
I
Fuck
don't
you, bitch.
associate it. And that's about it. Like, I don't associate with him because I don't want to be guilty by association. So when that stuff comes out, yeah, people should cut their ties.
Well, and it's like our parents told us. I mean, I grew up in South Minneapolis, and I've known a few fellas that I hung out with or knew or associated with that ended up being criminals and actually spending time in jail. Now, prior to knowing that, I might have talked to them. I might have even hung out with them. But the moment I find out they're guilty of something, they're kind of in a different realm. I don't even say I ignore them. I just, there's no reason to go around them. You got to use common sense. Parents always, when I was young, if I was going to a party, and we went to a lot of house parties when I was young, most parties you go in, your buddy's there, you're drinking, you're having fun. But there were some parties you walked in and go, something's not right here. I got to get the fuck out of here now. And you got to be smart enough to get away from those bad situations or bad people. And if you've done that, you're not guilty of anything. You're not guilty by association with this guy. It's just a happenstance meeting of somebody you once knew. So, I'm not trying to excuse anybody on this alleged list with Jeffrey Epstein, but we have to be careful of making everybody guilty. There may be explanations for it. Maybe there's not.
Right.
I find it hard to believe if there's 200 people that are on this list that they're all pedophiles. I just find that hard to imagine. They may be using bad judgment, but I have a hard time imagining they're all pedophiles. Like this is some big Democratic cabal, like the Republicans try to tell us.
Right.
There is a huge problem with child sex trafficking. We know that, and there are a lot of people involved. But we just have to be careful to not be accusing people until we know and there's some evidence.
Exactly. I mean, um, like you said, there's perfectly good explanation for some of them at least. You mentioned Katie Couric and going to a dinner because because Prince Andrew was going to be there.
Right.
Well, maybe Stephen Hawking was at a dinner for
Yeah.
whatever reason. He might have been in the same room as Epstein one time at a public place, but because it was brought up and mentioned in a conversation with an FBI agent, or whatever, I haven't looked at all the documents, but it could be on a tip sheet that, hey, Epstein was at this location and here were all the other people at that location. It
Right.
could be something that simple. So we got to see the rest of the information. We got to have a chance to see where this all goes in investigations and court cases. And then if we find out that, yes, definitely they were involved, they deserve whatever they got coming to them.
Absolutely. Whether they're Democrat, Republican, or part of the clergy, I don't fucking care. They should be taken to task. Eric, we're going to take a quick break, and we'll be right back after this. We are back on the Rational Boomer podcast. Hope your day's going well. Eric has joined us on the podcast today. He happens to be from Iowa. He's been a frequent guest on the show and a frequent emailer as well. So I have no question in my mind. You all know who Eric is, and we're thankful for him coming in. Eric, for the last couple of years, we've been watching Republicans trying so fucking hard to impeach Joe Biden. Oh, he got some illicit money through Hunter Biden by way of China. He's big in China. Oh, Joe Biden's getting fed all kinds of money from China. Now, the problem with that is we have yet to see one shred of evidence after 2 years or 3 years of investigation. So that's a problem for the Republicans. Then these new documents come out by way of the Democrats saying that Donald Trump, while he was president, brought in $8 million into his companies from foreign countries. Now, the interesting thing about that, a couple of interesting things. First of all, this is only 2 years out of his 4 year time in office, and this is only 20 countries. So the idea that there might be more countries and more money coming in the other 2 years is reasonable. $8 million is a lot of money, but it's probably just the half of it. The interesting thing about this is the uh, the country that gave Donald Trump the most money happens to be China. Number two was Saudi Arabia, which isn't too surprising. But what do you think this does to all these claims from the Republicans about Joe Biden and China, where they have no evidence, and all of a sudden here there is a bunch of evidence about their guy, their Lord and Master, getting $1 million from China in 2 years period?
Well, for rational people like you and me, and even most of the independents, they're going to look foolish.
Yeah, absolutely.
And even if they happen to somehow pull out some impeachment articles and get them over to the Senate, we know it's not going to happen. He's not going to get impeached. It ain't going to happen. But even in the court of public opinion, there's not going to be a question that this is all a stunt with most people, including independents, especially now. If they try to impeach him on ties to China, but you just showed your guy had bigger ties to China with proof, they've got nowhere to go with this. In fact, if they were smart, they would quietly just kind of end that investigation and move on.
That's probably what they'll do because it's going to be hard to fight that. My question to them would be this: if you're telling us they're giving China's giving money to Biden for influence, then why would they give money to Donald Trump and vice versa? Why would you give it to both sides? It makes no damn sense. And since you have no evidence, it kind of puts you in a bad spot. They've been doing this a lot. They've come hot and heavy with certain things. They've been made to look foolish, and then they back off and they go another direction. Next up, it'll be the border. How bad the border is, but they'll be made to look foolish there. It's it's almost pitiful when you watch these folks trying so hard to take down Joe Biden, and at every turn they get embarrassed.
Well, speaking of the border embarrassing, did you hear about Mike Johnson here recently?
Yeah, I think Old Soul brought something up, but please remind us because I don't remember what she said.
Apparently, there was something here recently, and I'm not sure what he was on. He was getting asked about it and got asked if he would give, if they conceded for money for the border to do, what Joe Biden or what they want, basically. If Joe Biden conceded, would you do it? And he goes, I'm not going to give Joe Biden a win.
Yeah, yeah. Actually, Old Soul and I did talk about that a little bit, and the fact is, there are lots of situations like the infrastructure and whatever are all good ideas, and both sides should like it. Like in the case with this border thing, yeah, let's put some more money into it, get some more guards, get some more whatever, do whatever we have to do. But it isn't about what's right or what's good for the country. It's about them worried about Joe Biden getting a win. What's ironic about it is they don't want to give him a win on the border, but they keep giving him wins on every fucking thing else inadvertently because they're so goddamn stupid.
Exactly. I mean, it's not like it was 15, 20 years ago. Pretty much everything pre-Obama was, if Joe Biden would have been president before Barack Obama, and he would have said, "Hey, Republicans, let's get something done on the border. This is the money I'm proposing, whatever." Republicans might have even tried to edge him for more money and said, "Okay, let's do something, but let's actually put some money against," or maybe they try to cut him back or whatever. But they'd agree, "Hey, we want to get the border done. Let's put it through bipartisan. We can all claim a win here
Right.
and move on." And that's what these Republicans don't see. They don't see the fact that they could claim a win by voting on it in Congress, but because it would also make Joe Biden look good, they can't. They
Yeah.
absolutely cannot give in, even if they could also claim a victory.
With this whole money that Donald Trump got from foreign countries, this exposes a problem with our judicial system too. I mean, he was supposed to divest himself, every other president has, from all his businesses. He did not do that. And of course, he gamed the system for all kinds of money. He was constantly at one of his properties, charging people exorbitant amounts of money for anything they did, including the Secret Service. There were people that filed lawsuits regarding the emoluments clause. They filed lawsuits to federal courts in a number of places. And every one of those cases, they basically said, oh, there's nothing to see here. And then when it finally got to the Supreme Court after Donald Trump was out of office, they said, well, it's just a moot point. Our federal judicial system failed America because they decided to ignore a true crime, the Emoluments Act, and they just let it go. And now they're getting hit in the face with it because it clearly was a problem, and they did fucking nothing. And we need to look at that as far as our judicial system because they're failing us every step of the way.
Yes, but at the same point, now I don't remember a lot of those cases, but I think, and I'm guessing, some of them were probably tossed out because they said, "Hey, look, you as private citizen don't have the right, don't have any standing to be in the court saying the president's violating this.
True.
The person who should be bringing it is probably going to be the DOJ. Well,
Yeah.
DOJ is never going to bring it, because
He's the president.
they work for the guy.
Right.
So I don't know how you get around that. I don't know if that's something if Congress would need to just pass a law of some kind establishing some independent person to be constantly monitoring all sitting presidents for. I don't know. But you're right. The judicial system failed because in most cases it was simply a uh, oversight as far as the wrong person brought the lawsuit or couldn't or whatever. And there was nothing we could do. And we were supposed to just trust Donald Trump to do the right thing. And we all know he wouldn't know the right thing if it bit him in the ass.
Right. Well, we've got an emoluments law that a president has to abide by. And while he's president, he decides not to abide by it. And then we choose not to prosecute him or really even investigate it because he's president. What the fuck is the point of the emoluments law? And then after he's out of office, they say, well, it's a moot point because he's no longer in office. You basically have a law that you cannot enforce or refuse to enforce. And therein lies the problem with this whole thing. It's breaking the law, but nobody can do anything about it.
Well, the way it's probably supposed to go is the House looks at him and says, listen here, fucker, we know you're breaking this thing. We're going to investigate you. Oh, look, we can prove it. Here's some articles of impeachment. We're taking you to trial. And, 15, 20, 25 years ago, maybe as far back as Nixon, I don't know. The Republican Party would have taken their own person to task. The Democrat Party, if it was,
Yeah.
if there was as much evidence about Joe Biden breaking the emoluments clause as there was Donald Trump, Nancy Pelosi would have taken and would have launched even though it was her guy.
Yeah.
She would have launched an investigation. And if it was deemed bad enough, they would have brought articles of impeachment. The Democrats would have done it. And I think that's the problem with this is it's designed to be enforced by Congress. The problem is we have one party in Congress not wanting to play
Right.
by the rules of fair play.
Right. Well, part of this is something I've said before. When a president is in office, because he can't be indicted, there's a lot of what they call norms that you never cross because, boy, if I cross that, I'm going to get in trouble. Most presidents understand that, as far as having a spy in the Oval Office alone with nobody else there or the emoluments clause or any of this stuff. And most presidents were decent enough or scared enough about the ramifications if they crossed those norms that nobody ever did. Donald Trump trampled over all those fucking norms. And he did whatever he wanted to do. And what he did is he exposed our Congress and our judicial system as having no teeth. People stayed away from those norms because they thought there would be some retribution for it or some punishment or accountability. Donald Trump proved that there is none. And the problem with that is now for every future president, it's a fucking free for all. Yeah, we're not supposed to do that, but nothing happened to Donald Trump, so we're cool. We'll do it anyway. And that's the damage Donald Trump did to the office of the presidency and our government as a whole.
You're right, but I also don't see it as irreparable harm. I think Joe Biden's doing a good job of bringing those norms back. And I think if ultimately Donald Trump is held accountable and sent to prison, that act alone should bring most people back in line.
Yeah.
And then we just got to pass things, whether it's rule changes, whether it's laws or whatever, to start reinforcing some of this. Same with, subpoenas to Congress.
Right.
Why hasn't Jim Jordan had to answer that subpoena yet? We're on day, 600 or something like that of Jim Jordan not answering a lawfully issued subpoena to testify before Congress?
When he did that, he basically outed congressional subpoenas as not worth shit. They aren't worth anything. That's why Hunter Biden's saying, fuck it. If you don't have to go, why should I have to go? And then when everybody does that, what's the point of having a congressional subpoena? They're toothless. And you're right. It's not irreparable, but we have to be cognizant enough to know that we've got to fix some things. First and foremost, when it comes to a president of the United States, the idea that there's some memo in the DOJ that says we can't indict a sitting president. Now, I know why that's an issue because could create chaos. But if you're going to try to tell us nobody is above the law, don't tell me nobody's above the law when the sitting president is above the law. Somebody could be in the presidency and commit even worse crimes than Donald Trump because of that little fucking memo. We can't indict him when he might be dangerous to this country or other people. Shit like that's got to be changed.
Well, see, and that's the one thing that I don't understand about that memo. Okay, all that is at one point somebody in the DOJ said, by my interpretation, we can't
Right,
do that. And it's not a court case, it's not a written down law. There's nothing behind it other than whoever wrote it initially said, I don't think this can happen. Merrick Garland could sit down today and write a new memo that says, if you can pass whatever burden of proof or whatever, you can indict a sitting president. He could write that today.
right,
It doesn't mean the next attorney general has to follow it.
right.
Might, out of tradition, but that needs to be looked at. And I just don't know if that's going to take, Merrick Garland writing a new memo, or if it's going to be an act of Congress or what.
Well, and the question is now that this evidence is there, that he brought in $8 million minimum from foreign countries and that he broke the emoluments clause. The question is now he's out of office. He's got all this other shit hanging over his head. What are we going to do about it? Or is it just in your face to the Republicans for them trying to impeach Donald Trump? Is it all just a performance and just saying, okay, you said this, but we got this? The question is he going to be held accountable for these crimes? Because that's in fact what they are, crimes.
Well, see, I think that's the other thing. I think the emoluments law, I don't think there's any teeth behind it as far as
I
any
don't
sort
think
of a
so either.
penalty. I think it's one of those ones, like I was saying, that's literally just there to give Congress the power to act in an impeach the president
Right,
over something.
right.
And it's a written down norm, basically. So I don't know how that goes forward. It probably is just something we can hold over the Republicans' heads. But it's also something we can use against him if he happens to somehow end up the nominee. That should be in every Biden ad.
Right. Absolutely. Absolutely. Now, have you heard Donald Trump is absolutely desperate to delay every court case. He's got to be smart enough, if not him, his lawyers have got to be smart enough to know they can't win any of those cases. There's so much evidence and he's so implicated in all this stuff, he cannot win. But of course, he keeps trying to delay things and it keeps not working, not to any great extent, maybe a little bit a week here, 2 weeks there. But his latest attempt is trying to get what's he trying to do? Oh, he's trying to get Jack Smith cited for contempt of court because while his court case with in D.C. is on a temporary stay while they're waiting to hear things, he's claiming Jack Smith is filing papers and that's against the law and he should be cited with contempt of court. Now, what is that even going to do? All that's going to do is create another delay if that was to happen. And it's not going to happen. It's absolutely ridiculous. Every argument he brings up is so silly. The judges have to be fucking laughing in his face.
That is not how that works. Just
No,
because he said, hey, you know what, this court is on hold until, or this case is on hold. She didn't say the case was gone. He can
right,
still file anything. It just means she's not going to do anything with those papers until the appeals court hears it. That just proves Jack Smith is that confident that he's going to win this appeal, that he's continuing to give her information so she has time to look it over. and review it. She's not going to rule on it. But the minute the appeals court comes down and she's going to go, oh, okay, this. Here's a bunch more rulings based on the stuff you just filed, Jack Smith. And I'm already good to go. And he's trying to keep the trial on track.
Right, right. And he should. But the point is the appeal that Donald Trump is making in the DC trial is I can't tell people how ridiculous it is that, you know, he wants to be found immune from anything he ever did as president and after president, and he's waiting for the appellate court to decide it. What's the date today? Well, this will air on January 5th. They're going to give arguments on the 9th, which is 4 days away. And I suspect shortly after that, the appellate court will come out and say, fuck yourself, Donnie. This is stupid.
Oh, yeah. I mean, one of the big arguments I've been seeing on TikTok against giving him immunity is if the president was immune from being charged for things while he was in office, Ford would not have had to pardon Nixon.
Right.
Ford pardoned Nixon for any criminal act that he may have committed while president, I believe was how it was worded or something like that. Right there, that pardon alone is enough to say the president isn't immune. And it was given by somebody that held the same office that
Right.
Donnie is trying to say had the immunity.
Right. And you know, in the same vein, the thing we've talked about before, if Donald Trump was to be given immunity, that would suggest that Joe Biden's got immunity too. He could cancel the 2024 election, put Donnie Trump in jail, do whatever the fuck he wants, and he's immune. That's the point. There's no way they're ever going to fine for Donald Trump, whether it be the appellate court or even the Supreme Court. It would create too much chaos, a constitutional crisis. Not even the Supreme Court is going to do that. It's just absolutely silly.
Exactly. And on top of it, this whole immunity thing, that what makes me laugh about it is Donald Trump isn't arguing that he didn't do the things we're saying he did.
Right.
He's
Right.
just saying, I had the right to do them. You can't charge me.
And well, how devastating is it when they find that he's not immune? That's half of his fucking arguments in all his cases. That I had every, you know, you talk about the documents case. Well, I had every right to do it. Well, no, you didn't. You don't have immunity, so fuck yourself. And this one court case is going to prove that he's not immune, and he's fucked in all of his cases.
Mm-hmm. Because he's not as smart as he thinks he is.
No.
His attorneys, I think before it's all said and done, I would be surprised if anybody he's ever had as an attorney that didn't get out early, if they don't all lose their law licenses.
Yeah, I wouldn't be surprised. I can't believe that they put themselves in that position, but they certainly have. Now, I just heard too, maybe I didn't hear this right, but I heard that Donald Trump has finally appealed the Colorado Supreme Court thing to the U.S. Supreme Court.
Yes,
And
he did.
I thought he might take a pause with that because that is a gamble. If the Supreme Court sides with the Colorado Supreme Court, Donald Trump done in this election. And his other strategy of winning the presidency and getting himself out of trouble is done too. This is a gamble for Donald Trump, and it's not a good gamble.
No, but his ego also couldn't let him be off the ballot.
Right.
As
right.
we talked about earlier. He needs to have this, you know, this loss is hanging over his head. People are saying, look, Donnie, you're a loser. You're off the ballot over here. You know, his ego can't take it, so he has to appeal. And even if it's just telling himself for a few more weeks that he's going to win this, it's, you know, it's what his ego needs.
Well, when I was I can't remember who I was talking to, maybe Ed or something, but if I'm Donald Trump and I'm thinking logically, I just let the Colorado thing go because I wasn't going to win that state anyway. Just let it go and let it kind of simmer. Michigan comes out and says, no, we're not taking them off the ballot. Minnesota says, no, we're not going to take them off the ballot. You know, just let it kind of work its way through. But he's put this on a fast track now by going to the Supreme Court. If they say, yes, Colorado is correct, that changes everything, because in Minnesota and Michigan and the places where the Supreme Court said, no, we're not going to take them off the ballot, then the people that brought it to court, not Donald Trump, are going to appeal it to the Supreme Court. And there's going to be no need to appeal it to the Supreme Court because they've already made the decision.
Well, that's the thing. It entirely depends on how the Supreme Court rules.
Right.
I've seen so many breakdowns by different people, from Hawk to Legal Dad to a few others, that are saying basically, who knows how this Supreme Court's going to rule. If they could find some way to put him back on the ballot in Colorado. Don't know how, because from what everybody I've read says, this opinion that they issued in this case is airtight.
Right.
It's written to apparently for the Supreme Court to look at, and sounds like it backs him into a corner.
Well, it does, because
But
in the Supreme Court's finding, they use a quote from Gorsuch before he was a Supreme Court justice. Now, how does Gorsuch vote against himself?
exactly. So there's one. Now you got four, because all three liberal justices are going to go, well, yeah, this makes sense. This is how this should be. You only need one more in an effort to give the Supreme Court some legitimacy. John Roberts is going to side with him, and he's off the ballot. It's
Right.
done.
Right.
The only thing is, John Roberts is probably going to be pushing to get the rest on board as well. Whether or not he can, I don't know, but I think they're going to side with Colorado, and they're probably going to word it in a way, because you can't have a hodgepodge of 50 states. Like I think I said the last time I was on the podcast, you can't say, well, Colorado says you're ineligible, so we can't count your votes in Colorado. But we can in Minnesota, but we
Right.
can't in Illinois, but we can in here. They're not going to. If they side against him, they are going to say he is in violation. He is ineligible for the office, and he's going to be off the ballot nationally.
Absolutely. I mean, so Minnesota says he can be on the ballot. And the thing people have to understand is, and I've said this before, and you've said it before, we've all said it before, this is just the primary ballot. This isn't the general election. That's a whole different issue. Now, if he's off the primary ballot, it's going to be impossible for him to be the nominee for the general election. But these are decisions for the primary ballot. Whether it will carry over to the general election, I'm assuming it will, because if he can't qualify to be on the primary ballot, how is he going to qualify to be on the general ballot?
That was the one thing that the Michigan decision, that was the only reason they said he was allowed to be on the primary ballot, is because primaries are party held issues. They're only figuring out who their nominee is going to be. After their nominee is decided, that was the time to see if that nominee was eligible under the Constitution. They punted on it because they didn't want to decide the case, basically.
Right.
They looked at it and said, okay, we don't have to decide today because this is only the primary. However, if the Supreme Court upholds it and says, no, you're not eligible to be on a primary ballot because you're not eligible to be president, it has to carry to
The general
the
election?
general election.
Well, that's what I'm thinking. Say he gets taken off all the primary ballots. Now there's no way he can be the nominee from the Republican Party, but we know that Donald Trump will try to go as a third party because he's throwing a Hail Mary. And if he was a third party candidate, I would fucking love that, because it would destroy the Republican Party. But will it ultimately affect him in the general election? Like you say, I assume it would. If he's not worthy of being on a primary ballot, how could he be worthy of being on the general ballot?
Well, that's just it. If they say, you can't hold the office, which is basically what the Colorado ruling did. She said the Colorado Supreme Court says in there, he is not eligible to be president. Therefore, any vote made for Donald Trump in the name of Donald Trump cannot be counted. Period. So even
Right.
if he runs as a third party, he could get, let's just say he does what he did in 2020 and gets 71 million votes nationwide. Say every person who was a Republican, if he runs third party, doesn't vote Republican, whoever their nominee is, and votes for Donald Trump. Joe Biden would win the election,
Right.
with 100% of the vote because they're not votes that can count.
Right. Well, you make a good point here. The 14th Amendment doesn't say if you do this, you can't be on the ballot. It simply says if you do this, you can't hold office. I mean, theoretically, you could run, but you can never get into the office because the Constitution says you're fucked. And I think that's where, people think they're trying to take him off the ballot, and they're trying to take him off the ballot because he can't hold the office. The thing is with the primaries, the primary vote isn't putting him in any office. It's just making him the nominee for an office. And maybe that's the sticking point where some of the states like Minnesota or Michigan are saying, hey, we can't take him off the ballot because it's not about an office. The presidency is a whole different situation.
Exactly. But I know in Colorado, that was part of it. There's some language in Colorado state law that says you cannot be, if you're ineligible to be the president, you are ineligible to be on the primary ballot.
Right.
Which is what they use to get him off the primary ballot. It's no different. A lot of the analogies I heard were you have somebody who's 19 years old running for president.
True.
Well,
True.
Constitution says you're 35.
Right.
You could get 71 million votes writing in the 19-year-old to be president. He still can't be president.
Right.
Those votes do not count. They do not matter.
When I first heard about the 14th Amendment effort to get him off the ballot, I didn't really put too much weight in it because I didn't think we even needed it. He's not going to win the election. He's going to be taken down in court. He's going to maybe be in jail. And I think just emotionally and physically, he'll fall apart at some point between now and November. The 14th Amendment seems a little closer to being a possibility. Let me ask you this. I had a little debate with Old Soul, and I talked about this. She says, and Old Soul, I think we can both agree, she's a smart woman. She says that she doesn't think the Supreme Court will take him off the ballot, and she thinks it's best for the country to have him run and get his ass kicked. Because then presumably people will set it aside and say it's over. That if he gets taken off the ballot, then all the Trump fucks will just say, oh my God, he would have won if he was on the ballot. You cheated, all this stuff. And it would create this constant chaos that we've been dealing with for 6 years. I understand her point. And I said to her, I said, but here's the thing. We're in an emergency situation. If I got my hand on a frying pan and it's hurt, maybe I can make an insurance claim if I keep it on the frying pan, but I'm taking that motherfucker off now because it hurts. And I think that's where we're at in this country. We've got to get Donald Trump out of the equation as quickly as possible, whether it's better for us in the long run or not, because no matter what happens, the Trump fucks are going to be screaming some bullshit.
Well, as much as I would like to agree with Old Soul, and for a lot of things, she is way smarter than me.
She's smarter than me too.
I'm going to disagree. We've already had an election. We've kicked his ass in an election.
True.
It didn't do any good.
Right.
It's not going to matter if we beat him again. Joe Biden could beat Donald Trump by, 20 million votes and get 400 votes in the Electoral College. The Trump fucks are still going to scream, "You cheated! It's rigged! You did this! You did that! Blah 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 blah." It's not going to matter.
No.
But if we get him off the ballot, as you've talked about several times, some of these Trump fucks are going to stay home.
Right.
Now
right. Exactly.
We were talking about it earlier in the podcast. They stay home. They don't vote in the down ballot races. Now we can maybe flip some of these states that wouldn't have been a contest.
Right.
Because they stayed home.
Now, what you know of Trump fucks in your state, Iowa, I know you don't consort with them all that much because you got a weak stomach and they're dumb motherfuckers. But do you really think that Trump fucks would stay away from the ballot box just because Donald Trump was not the candidate? I think they would, but I don't it's coming from nothing. It's just a guess for me.
Some of them would, but we can't count on it.
No.
Because Republicans typically they vote.
Yeah.
Period. You tell them there's an election, it doesn't matter. They're going to turn out no matter what the election's for. You could You could say, hey, we're having an election next Tuesday for whether or not we need to hire a person to clean out leaves from all the storm gutters in town. And they would show up to vote for that shit. They'd be the only people to show up to vote because nobody else cares.
Yeah.
And they'd say, why are we voting on it? It should just be dealt with and done. But they'd stand there. They would go to a polling place and they would find a thing to vote for it. Or if they had to pick a person, whatever the case would be, they'd show up for it
I have
because
a
they love that shit.
They love that shit. And I have a theory as to why they turn out so much at elections. See what you think. I think they turn out to elections, whether it be presidential or for a storm drain, because the Republicans are constantly saying, if you don't do this, you're going to lose your country. We've got to be patriots and save our country. Those damn Democrats, those pedophiles, the cabal, they're trying to take away our country from us. And these people are stupid enough to buy that shit and they will do anything they're fucking told.
Oh, I think you're right. They they've been told that if they don't go out and do their patriotic duty and vote and protect the their rights, they're going to have their right to vote stripped from them.
Right.
Yet the people that are telling them that are the ones that would strip it from them. They
Right.
don't see it. They cannot connect those dots. Um, just like we were talking about, you know, the uh the summer food program
Right.
that she turned down. You know, they go out and they were told basically, well, you don't want to give your hard-earned tax money to these freeloaders, so they vote for her. And they vote against their best interest. There's been a push for years here in Iowa, and I worked grocery retail for a long time. And what can be bought with food stamps has always been a divisive topic among people who aren't on the program.
Right.
Um, One of the things you hear a lot is they're eating better than I do. Can you afford to go buy that food? Well, yeah, then go buy it.
Yeah.
Nothing's stopping you, but they feel that way. There's also a chunk of people who I can think of an example. It was a couple. The wife was going to be off for maternity leave, and they had double income, making really good money. They had 2 or 3 car payments, a mortgage, and a bunch of they were making and they were keeping up on all of it. But she was going to be off on maternity leave. Well, they didn't qualify for any sort of assistance for the 5 or 6 weeks she was going to be off. 10 years later, she's still bitter about it. Well, when I really needed the help, you didn't need the help if you didn't qualify for
Right.
a family of 3 on one income. You stretched yourself thin on your double income and you weren't actually needy. But there's a group of people that don't think anybody else deserves any help. I don't want to say everybody because it sounds like I'm generalizing, but most people seem to always know somebody who's taken advantage of the system. You can think of somebody who could do better or whatever. And that's what you hold in your mind, and you think everybody on the system is that bad. It's not the
Right.
case.
It's like not every brown person coming across the border is a rapist, a drug addict, and a murderer. It's just not the case
Exactly.
any more than every rich person. Well, maybe it's true, but they don't question rich people for getting tax cuts that they are doing nothing and not paying taxes. It's just about looking down their noses at somebody's lesser than them and begrudging them the fact, well, he's eating better than me. I've heard that too. And I go, what the fuck you're talking about? Because I've known people that have struggled just to get by every day. And if you think they're grifting the system and getting by better than you don't know what the fuck you're talking about. It is tough for those people who are just trying to feed their kids.
Exactly. I know here in Iowa, um, as far as what's allowed currently, unless they've changed it since I got out of grocery retail, anything that is considered food is allowed. And this is again some of the stuff that becomes people start arguing about. Um, the grocery store I worked for had, take and bake pre-made pizzas. They
Yeah.
were cold, they were raw, but they were good pizzas.
Yeah.
But they were also more expensive than a frozen pizza. Oh well, that's too fancy. They shouldn't be able to get stuff like that. Or pre-made sandwiches because they're cold sandwiches. Doesn't matter. Shouldn't be able to get it according to some people. That's not what that's for. You should have to go out and make your bread from scratch, and you know can't give them any slight convenience. It's ridiculous.
Well, we could say
Um,
the same. We could say the same thing about rich people getting tax cuts. Why do you need a Gulfstream? Fly a commercial like the rest of us. What the fuck? Are you special? I mean, if we weren't giving you money and you're doing it on your own money, that's fine. But since we're giving you this corporate welfare, maybe you should shore up some things too. If you need the welfare, or if the oil companies need the subsidies, or if farmers need the subsidies, maybe you should shore some shit up too. But that never happens.
exactly. Well, it's like that you talk about the corporate planes and stuff. Remember when the automakers went to the Obama administration begging for a bailout,
Right.
and they all flew private jets out there, and the public backlash of, oh, you come out hat in hand saying we can't make any money, but you flew your private jet. The next time they went out, they all flew commercial.
Yeah. Yeah. Exactly. Because it was all about perception and image. I mean, it's like pulling up to a Goodwill in a Bentley and buying some cheap sweaters. What the fuck? They don't care if they need it or not. They're just going to grab as much shit as they possibly can. And then on top of it, begrudge people who have children that are fucking hungry. In this country, the last thing that should happen is that we have any kids in this country hungry. I don't care what it fucking costs. That's the least thing that should happen in this country. And if our government is intended to help the people of this country, well, let's fucking do it and shut up about it.
Oh, exactly. A couple things I've heard talked about for years, besides universal health care, what they call universal basic income, where every citizen gets an amount of money every month, every week, whatever, to live on. That can go toward your housing, whatever, and it comes out of your tax money. Same with
Right.
food assistance. That every citizen should just get an amount of food assistance daily or monthly or whatever to put some food, because we have so much wealth in this country, and I know this, if we just use it properly, nobody should go hungry.
Right.
Nobody should have to worry about where their next meal is coming from. Nobody should have to worry about what their treatment at the hospital is going to cost for whatever their case might be, whether or not they're going to have to ration their meds because it's too expensive. We have the ability to be the most prosperous nation and make sure everybody is taken care of. But you can't, but too many people are afraid of, well, I don't want to have any, my name on that I'm getting any sort of government assistance. Even if every citizen in the country was getting it, wouldn't like the look of getting it because they couldn't take care of themselves.
Well, it's I've been fortunate in my life where I've never had to get government assistance. Not that I wouldn't have asked for it if I needed it, but I didn't ever need it. But I certainly don't begrudge other folks that have to have it. Not everybody has the same situation. Not everybody gets the same opportunities for whatever reason. And there might be some people that take advantage of it. I know that's the case. There's people that take advantage of every fucking situation, but the vast majority of people don't. We've got to get out of our heads. We get people, what people will say is like if somebody gets food stamps and free food, okay? Okay, yeah, but what do I get? Even though you don't need anything. I know there are some families where if you got a couple of kids and you help one out, then somehow you got to give the same amount to the other kid, even though he doesn't need it, just to be fair. We don't do that in our family. If a kid needs help, we give them help, and they both need help at certain times. But I give one help, and if the other bitches about it, which they would never do, I say, you should count your blessings that you don't need the fucking help. If you do, we're here for you. But don't think everything has to be spread equally, because not everybody is equal in terms of their needs. We're here to help kids, and we should be here to help all kids, whether whether there are some people grifting out there or not. That's not the problem. The kids aren't grifting, the adults are. So don't let the kids go hungry just because some adults are fucking up.
Oh, exactly. I mean, I could name out countless examples of people who had taken advantage of the system, but I would much rather help 1,000 people and have three take advantage of the kindness than not help anybody. Too many people
Absolutely.
see it the other way around. In the number of times I've heard, well, if we just kick all those people that are taking advantage of food stamps and welfare and Medicaid and all this stuff, we just kick them off the program. We balance the budget. No, motherfucker.
You know
The
how we might
percentage
balance
we
you know how we might balance the budget? When Donald Trump came out with his taxes and we saw all these crimes of getting around paying their legitimate taxes, he's not the only wealthy person to do that. If we went after the wealthy people who aren't paying their legitimate taxes or aren't paying taxes at all, if we got those motherfuckers to pay all the taxes, we'd be in a much better situation. And the only way I can explain that to you, 1950s, Bill Clinton, when people were paying the sums of taxes they should be paying, as opposed to having it drop down to like 28%, which is less than you and I pay. So
oh,
if we just
oh
made
yeah.
them pay, this country would be in much healthier condition.
Oh yeah. And not to put too big a point on it, but Donald Trump didn't release his taxes.
Right.
Congress released them for him because
True.
they got a hold of them. He
True.
didn't release them willingly. He didn't want us to see that shit. Most rich people don't want us to see that they're paying next to nothing in their taxes. If they paid their fair share, we closed some of these loopholes, we could afford a lot more. Same with, you know, I think we need to go through the Department of Defense with a fine tooth comb.
Yeah, absolutely.
No one wants to crack down on military spending. The military spending is like 50% of our budget, if not more.
Yeah. Yeah.
And you got planes that are 20 years behind schedule and triple the cost, and we're still building the fucker. At what point do you scrap it and move on?
Yeah. If you, if you took everybody off of welfare that needed it and didn't have money, if you took them all off, it wouldn't even be close to the budget for the defense combined with all the people that don't pay taxes. If you really want to fix the situation, let's start at the top, cut the fat from the top, and work our way down.
Exactly. I mean, I it's like the total number of dollars in the budget, not even for the people that don't deserve it, like the total number, like the total budget for people getting any sort of assistance in food stamps and welfare and medical, etc. I want to say is like a fraction of 1% of the entire budget of the federal government.
Right.
But the problem is, the reason you hear about it is because that's something on day-to-day levels. Almost every American knows somebody who has gamed the system in their favor and is getting a benefit that they probably didn't deserve, or they're doing something. Like, I had a guy that worked for me. A prime example. It would get to, every 6 months you had to turn in your pay stubs for a month or so to prove you had the income required to stay on your benefits.
Right.
Well, he'd start about 2 months before he would be ready for this review. When he knew it was coming up, he'd start looking at what he had made. Well, he'd start scaling back his hours, working even fewer to make sure he came in right under the income so he could still get it.
Right.
And do I begrudge it? No, because the difference in the hours that he cut off his paycheck, he was only cutting maybe 4-ish hours a week. It wasn't going to offset what he was getting in benefits,
Right.
especially in medical.
Right.
I was dating a girl 15 years ago who was she had a son, and the only state benefit she was getting at the time was daycare assistance. and they were paying out, I want to say it was $600 or $800 a month at that time for daycare,
Yeah, it's crazy.
which is a lot of money.
Yeah.
But she went in for her review, and like they averaged, I think it was 3 months worth of pay stubs, and her average was over the limit in those 3 months by $25. And
Wow.
it kicked her off because it's a hard and fast. You yes or no limit. There is no gray area, no anything. And $25 cost her $600 or $800, whatever it was, in daycare assistance. And we had to scramble to figure it out and make it work and go from there, all over 20 some dollars.
But if you,
That
but if
20
you had
some
been
dollars
wealthy,
it
if
wasn't gonna make up the difference.
no, and if you had been wealthy, you probably could have scammed your way through this whole thing and it wouldn't have been taken away from you. That's the problem. They take advantage of people who aren't in a position to fight back, and we get fucked in the end. Well, Eric, I tell you what,
Exactly.
we are going to wrap up the Rational Boomer podcast. I appreciate you coming on as always. This makes my life a whole lot easier. Doing this from Georgia is a little more, not complex, a little more hassle, but I enjoy doing it, and it's even that much more enjoyable when people like you and Old Soul come back on and help me out here, because you guys add a lot to the podcast, and I appreciate it immensely.
Well, I enjoyed being on the podcast once again, and look forward to the next time I'm on.
Now, is there supposed to be a snowstorm coming through our area in the Midwest? I heard something about that.
If there is, I'm not sure about that.
Okay. I'm here till Tuesday. Hopefully, if there is a snowstorm, it'll be long gone and cleared off by the time I get there. I mean, I don't know what's going on down in Iowa, but I can't complain about the winter up in Minnesota. Here we are in the early part of January, and when I left there, it was 40 degrees and no snow.
Yeah, that's about what we've got. I mean, it's still just chilly enough. I'd say it's mid 30s to upper 40s almost all day, just about enough that I'm still wearing a jacket, mostly because I don't want to deal with that initial blast of cold air when you step outside.
Oh,
After
fuck
that,
yeah.
fine.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, Eric, have a good week. Appreciate you coming on. Those folks listening, I appreciate you taking the time to listen. I hope you have a great day. And of course, we will talk to you again tomorrow.